Sir.
Today we are doing proceeds, and okay. Everybody good? Yeah.
The essay question, we were supposed to submit that online. correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just had a question about the exam. So for the exam, should we put like the statute stuff? Like, could we like cite it? If that makes sense.
Well, the most important thing is that you get the law right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to grade you on if you get the citation 100% correct. That's not
Okay.
part of the grade. Okay? So your statement of the law is the most important thing. I find it helpful to think of statutory sections as a way to as a memory tool. So I know that 9315 tells me what happens on the disposition of collateral, for example, right? But if you get the law right, that's what matters.
Okay.
Okay? So that's going to be the most important thing. I don't take points off for lack of a section number if your statement of the law is correct. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so proceeds. I did not put up a lecture about the priority stuff. I think we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. I was doing it and I'm like, I'd rather actually have a conversation with you about it. I will go back and maybe add a couple of slides after class, once we've had a chance to have a conversation about it, to talk about the priorities battles, because I think this is going to be a little bit confusing when we start talking about new debtors and things like that. So I want to talk about it first and see where people are having trouble. All right? So the first question is definition of what is proceeds, right? And Nicole, hi. I think we passed over a question before. Are you ready to do this one?
Oh, what number?
The first one. So I think it's 120.
18. Oh, 19.
Yeah, I got one.
119, yeah.
She got lucky.
Okay, want me to start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I said for A, she was fired in the ordinary course of business.
Perfect. Buyer in the ordinary course of business, there is no security interest that continues. Hopefully that's jumps right out at you. You see somebody selling from inventory, buyer in the ordinary course of business. Now, just so we get specific about it, which security interest does the buyer take free of under 9320? 9328.
Would it be the car? Or are you
So-
asking me?
So a more general question. Under 9320A, it says specifically a particular security interest. It's not all security interests.
Is it created by the buyers or by the seller?
By the seller, exactly. That's exactly it. So I just want to make sure we understand that, right? Security interests, the buyer in the ordinary course takes free of a security interest created by the buyer's seller. Not all security interests created by the seller. So if there's a pre-existing security interest that the seller didn't create, that doesn't go away. We still have to look at 9315A. We'll see that again in a minute. Okay, so B, what are the proceeds?
I wasn't really sure, but I said the car trade-in and then the $200.
So the car
Yeah.
that was given in an exchange, that's proceeds, right? The car was received in exchange for payment of the new car. The check for $200. What was the total? If you walked away from this transaction as the buyer, what would you say you had paid for the car?
Probably the value of your other car.
So right, and the $200.
Yeah.
What about, did you walk away and that was it, or did you have to give something else?
Would you say the promissory note or something?
Yeah. Is the promissory note proceeds?
I don't know.
Well, let's take a look at the definition. Under, is it 28A? 9102, right, that's not, it's 56, I think, actually, right? Definition of proceeds,
910264.
64, that's it, thank you. Take a look at that definition, 9102A64. Is the note something received by the seller in exchange or for the sale of the car?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yes. That promissory note is proceeds. So under question B, it's all three things. It's whatever is given in exchange for the sale of the collateral under 9102A64A. So proceeds is a pretty broad concept. Whatever you get in exchange. Question C asks, does the attachment of the creditor's security interest in the proceeds, is it automatic or must they be claimed in the original security agreement?
I thought it was automatic.
It is. No statement need be made in the security agreement to cover proceeds. You are automatically covered. Security interest automatically is covered in the proceeds. So, this first question, we're answering two things. What is proceeds? And two, is it covered by a security agreement? And the answer to both to the second question is yes, automatically. Nothing need be done in order to have a security interest in proceeds. Does that make sense? I want to make sure we're all on the same page with that. It's pretty straightforward. If somebody acquires collateral, acquires property from somebody that is collateral to a loan, whatever that person who gave them the collateral receives in exchange becomes proceeds. I don't care if it's cash, a check, promissory note, a cow, all of it, proceeds. All right, and that's 9203F. Don't have to say it in the agreement, it's automatic. Unlike after acquired property. Do you have to have a statement in order for after acquired property to be included? Do you need a statement in the security agreement to include after acquired property? Yes. Absolutely. Except there are circumstances where inventory and account. But we're going to say that by saying inventory, that's not limited. Now, normally when I write these problems, I say inventory now owned or hereafter acquired, just so we don't have any confusion. But there can be cases, and that is correct, where courts say inventory is a concept that turns over. But you essentially need a statement to the effect that after acquired property is included, 9204, but not proceeds. Let's say the secured party has a security agreement that includes deposit accounts. So it says the security interest covers deposit accounts. And then the debtor sells something and deposits the cash into the deposit account. What is that cash? Is it collateral? That's a bad example. Let me do it differently. Let's say in exchange for the car, the buyer gave the seller a cash register. So, seller's a store, buyer gives a cash register. What's the cash register in the hands of the secured the debtor? Their store, what would they call the cash register?
Equipment.
Equipment, okay. Now, security interest only covers inventory. Is the cash register in that exchange collateral for the loan? So they've sold something in exchange for the cash register. Is that cash register collateral?
Is it proceeds?
Well, is it?
I think it's proceeds.
So is it collateral?
I'm gonna say no because
Oh, too bad, but thank you for playing. Let's take a look at the definition of collateral,
Okay.
okay?
Collateral is proceeds.
Yes. Collateral includes proceeds. Okay, that's what, another point I want to make. If it's proceeds, then it is collateral. Now, let's assume in my hypo that the security agreement covered inventory and equipment. Now owned or hereafter acquired. The buyer exchanges a cash register for buying the inventory. So the debtor now owns a cash register. Is that cash register proceeds?
Yes.
Okay. Is it also equipment?
Yes.
So, collateral can be collateral both because it is proceeds and also because it's covered by the security agreement. It could be after acquired property and proceeds. It can be both. Doesn't have to be either. If you get a security interest as after acquired property, you don't have to worry about proceeds. It doesn't matter how it came into existence. If it's after acquired equipment, it's covered by the security agreement. It says it. But it also could be covered as proceeds. Now the cool thing about proceeds is the security agreement doesn't have to cover that type of collateral. So if the security agreement says inventory, but the cash register is not inventory in the hands of the debtor, it's equipment, it's still collateral because it's proceeds. It's collateral as proceeds. Okay, and that falls from the definition of collateral. Yes?
I know a cash register and cash aren't the same thing, but it reminded me. Can we talk about cash proceeds and the lowest intermediate balancing test?
Yes, but let's put that off because there's a question about it and I want to do it in that question.
Yeah.
I will absolutely cover that because we have a question where the lowest intermediate balance test comes in, okay? But that's a great question and you need to understand it.
I think you said this in the lecture, but what is the importance of proceeds kind of? Is it just like tracking things or like for us?
No. So the importance of proceeds is that when the collateral disappears because it's been transferred to somebody else, the secured party gets nervous about what they can foreclose on. And if they don't, if the rule was you're the only thing that's covered is collateral as described in the security agreement, well then collateral could evaporate and then the secured party would not be able to collect, right?
Yeah.
So there would be an advantage to the debtor to just giving it away. So what the drafters of the code did, and this has always been the case with secure transactions, is that if you transfer the collateral at some level, that security interest transfers over to the newly acquired proceeds. From the debtor's perspective, it's a really good thing because it means that not from the debtor's perspective. From the buyer's perspective, it's a really good thing because you don't have to worry about, you gave this money over to the secured to the debtor, and the secured party has a relationship with the debtor. More than likely, that's who they're going to sue. They're only ever going to go after the buyer under, if the debtor is bankrupt, is insolvent, right? So it reduces the need of the secured party to worry about who buys the collateral. They can go after the proceeds. It's sort of a replacement. It's a replacement idea.
It's only the case though if the security interest doesn't continue through the sale, right?
Yeah. In the first problem, if you're a buyer in the ordinary course, you don't have to worry about the existing security. But it allows the secured party to get a replacement type of collateral for the stuff that was given away. Yeah, that's the purpose. All right. Where are my notes here? I have too many pieces of paper here. Second. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. I'm not don't mean to put you off, we will get to
Okay,
that
no
problem, it's a great
worries.
question. Just because we have a problem, it's easier to work with the
Yeah, of
person,
course.
sure, yeah. Okay, so the Case Farmers Cooperative wants us to take this into account. The concept of of proceeds is very broad, right? There's 5 categories of things that are collateral, including one that says arising out of the collateral. What arises out of the collateral? In my lecture I mentioned that's not a defined term, and we really don't know what that means. And so that allows secured parties to get really creative about arguing that things are proceeds that you wouldn't think of as given in exchange for. So in the case, the question is feed collateral? Sorry, is the fattening of the hogs by the feed which is subject to the security interest now make the hogs collateral of the original loan on the feed? The answer is no. I think that they said biological ingestion and conversion does not create proceeds. So the pigs don't become proceeds because they ate feed that was subject to a security interest. They're not proceeds. At best, the pig poop is, right? That's probably the only thing I can think of. Now, I don't know if there's ever going to be a case where anybody cares about that, but the pigs in that case are not. But the argument is not without merit, because you could argue that the pigs arise out of the feed, right? They would die without it. Generally speaking, the courts are not sympathetic to that argument. What does arise out of collateral? So let's assume that you have livestock as collateral, and the livestock has, I think like cows give birth to calves, right? Are the calves, do they arise out of the cow? Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good argument. How about the winnings of a racehorse? Do they arise out of the horse? It's really actually a pretty difficult question, because they don't arise out of the horse in the way we think of arising out of it. But you couldn't have the winnings without the horse. So are the winnings proceeds of a racehorse? Financing the purchase of a racehorse, does that give you access to the winnings of that racehorse? Again, courts are not yet sympathetic to that argument. I have seen at least one case where the court said no, because they don't arise out of the horse, right? They're a consequence of a jockey riding the horse in a race. That's not arising out of. But you can see a secured party making that argument, right? Seems like a pretty good one. If you're the secured party and you want to have the winnings of a racehorse as your collateral, how should you do it if it's not going to be proceeds? I think you're all mumbling the same answer. Just say any winnings of the racehorse now owned or hereafter acquired. So just directly say it. And I think that's a good argument for why it shouldn't be proceeds, right? There is an easy way to cover it. Just if you anticipate there's going to be winnings from this racehorse, just say it in the security agreement. Any winnings now owned or hereafter acquired. Something like that. Right? Or any winnings generated by. Is that hand up for a question?
No, I was scratching,
Okay,
sorry.
I'll make sure. All right. Problem 120. So, what's going on in this one?
Octopus National Bank made a loan to Dairy Incorporated, secured on Dairy's equipment, but then they sold the equipment to Cheeseworks, which sold the equipment to Buttercup.
All right, so we have a security interest going to the bank, money going back, right? That's the loan. Dairy sells the product to Cheeseworks. So the collateral goes this way, and money goes up that way. And then Cheeseworks sells it to,
Buttercup.
okay. So what's the question?
If the money that Cheeseworks received as proceeds of the sale, is it subject to OMB's security interest?
So it's this money, not this money, this money. Interesting. All right. So dairy, who's the debtor? So that's the debtor. Is Cheeseworks the debtor? All right, let's take a look at the definition of debtor. Debtor means a person having an interest other than a security interest or other lien in the collateral, whether or not the person is an obligor. So dairy is debtor obligor. Is Cheeseworks, are they a debtor? They have an interest in the collateral, don't they? Okay. So, but they're not a new debtor. We're going to come back to that later. That's the really complicated stuff. All right. So, is Cheeseworks a buyer in the ordinary course? Well, look at the problem. What are they selling?
I mean, they bought the equipment from.
Ah, it's equipment, right? Security interest in equipment. Is dairy in the business of selling equipment?
I assume so.
Well, they're a dairy, right? What do they use equipment for?
Produce milk, I assume.
So what do they sell normally in the ordinary course of their business?
Milk.
Milk. Is equipment something that they sell?
No.
Probably not, okay? If dairy was a dairy farm and equipment sales company, okay, fine, then that's cool. It would be inventory, right? But they say equipment. Equipment is a type of collateral that's not inventory. So I'm thinking they're not a buyer in the ordinary course. So therefore, did Cheeseworks take the equipment subject to the security interest in favor of A&B?
I mean, I thought it was yes based off the case, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think it is. So the equipment comes to Cheeseworks, right? So dairy, this is the equipment being transferred, subject to the security interest. They then sell it to Buttercup and they get money in exchange. So is this money proceeds of the sale of the equipment subject to the security interest held by O&B? All right. Does the security interest continue in the sale of the collateral?
As long as it's identifiable.
That's the key. It has to be identifiable cash proceeds. Okay. We haven't yet come to the lowest intermediate value because we don't have the numbers yet, but that's the test we probably will use because it's money in a bank account, right? It's in a deposit account, so we're going to have to trace. 9315 requires that we be able to trace, that the proceeds be identifiable. So the cash has to be identifiable. The cash is proceeds of the sale of the equipment because of if it's identifiable.
So if you can't find the money, then it's not.
Well, if it's not identifiable, what does that mean?
Then the security interest doesn't attach.
Yeah, it doesn't just automatically attach to all cash. You have to prove what cash. Right, so let's just change the hypo for a second just to make it clear, right? So let's say the equipment is exchanged for a tractor. Okay? Let's say this is not cash but a tractor. That's easy to identify, right? That's not hard. It's that tractor. The cash is harder. As we'll see in a minute, we have a rule to figure it out. This is the basics of proceeds right here, these two first problems. If you don't understand this, the rest is going to make no sense whatsoever.
So does Buttercup not take the equipment subject to LMU's original security agreement?
They absolutely do. If Cheesecake is a seller of the equipment,
Yeah.
who created the security interest?
Dairy.
So does the buyer in the ordinary course rule save Buttercup?
So my question is, how do they have the security interest proceeds of the sale and also have a security interest in the equipment?
Well, there's an answer to that. We just did it in problem 119. How is it that they have a security interest in? 9315, right? Does the security interest continue in proceeds?
Yeah.
Under what rule?
But wouldn't that be like a windfall, because they would have,
Ah. Can they collect twice? No, they can never collect twice. They can only get paid up to the value of the debt that's owed. So ONB has a choice, right? They have a choice, either go after the equipment or go after the cash. Assuming that both are more in value than the debt, they can't go after both. Can they go after both if it's less? They can sue everybody and everything up to the value of the collateral, up to the value of the loan. Yeah.
so they have the interest, but they can only collect on.
It's the blob. It rolls along and touches things and they get sucked into it. Proceeds is evil if you think the blob is evil. If you're the bank, is the blob evil? No, you release the blob. Right? You're the aliens that came to the planet and released the blob. You love the blob. Debtors and buyers and other people hate the blob because of this. Yeah.
If we were to assume that dairy was a buyer and the owner.
No. Sorry, dairy's not a buyer at all.
I'm sorry, if we were to assume that dairy were in the business of selling equipment.
Correct, okay.
And then that makes cheese versus the buyer in the ordinary course, is that?
Does that cut off, if you are a buyer in the ordinary course of the seller's business, does that cut off a security interest created by the seller?
Yes.
Yes, by definition, that's 9328.
So then it's just becomes that money becomes proceeds and.
It's not proceeds anymore because there was no, okay, if there's no security interest, right? They're not a buyer in the ordinary, if they're a buyer in the ordinary course, is there a security interest anymore? No, they're out of the picture. Then the only proceeds that the bank can go after is this.
So yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I didn't mean the
Yeah.
butter coming in with that.
Yes, then they're done. Then it's not the blob. Then the blob has been,
He gets
I don't know,
out.
was it Steve McQueen in that original movie? Yeah, Steve McQueen, right? With a big flamethrower or something like that. Yes.
If they hadn't filed.
Yes.
their,
If they hadn't filed. Does a buyer take free of a security interest that's not perfected?
Yeah,
What rule?
I don't remember the number.
Yes. That's the law. The law is a buyer takes, but what kind of buyer? Is it all buyers? BFPs take free of an unperfected security interest. 9317B. Yes, that is correct. If this is an unperfected one, but the problem I think said it was perfected, right?
Does it say?
I think, doesn't it say it's perfected?
No.
Can a buyer take free of an unperfected security interest? 93, if they're a bona fide purchaser for value.
I think it might have been one of the problems, I don't remember, but I got, so if there was a PMSI
Yes.
and it was in consumer goods, so it automatically perfected, does the rule for buyer of consumer goods like still apply? Like I guess what I'm saying is would somebody, if they wanted to, the PMSI to flow through to the buyer, do
Okay.
they have to still file?
PMSI is a priority concept. It's not a perfection concept.
Okay. It might come up in one of the questions.
Well, I take that back. To get purchase money secured party priority, you have to do certain things.
So you
Right?
still have to file, even though.
Well, you have to do whatever the PMSI requires.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to do anything if it's consumer goods.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it was in the essay then.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. We're good? Problem 121. You guys are, you can take it if you want. You spoke last week, so.
Oh, good then.
All right, go ahead. Oh, you're good, or are you volunteering?
No, it's fine, yeah.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
This was pretty easy, so basically, credit association loans farmer bean money secured as crops. The federal government pays farmer bean not to grow the crops, and, is the government paying the proceeds? And, according to the case, it would not be considered proceeds.
Yeah, the courts are a little bit all over the place on this one. How is not growing crops proceeds of crops? That's weird, right? But there have been a couple of courts that have said, well, it's the crops you hypothetically would have grown. And so therefore it's proceeds of those hypothetical crops. There have been cases that have said that. Ridiculous, I think, but the better answer if you're the bank is how do you get a security interest in government payments? Just say it. Yes, just say it. I hereby take security interest in your crops and any payments you may receive from the government to not grow crops. And that would be logical because it's the value that you receive, whether you're selling the crops or the payment for the government, that the bank is expecting to be used to pay the bank off, right? That's the money that they think the secured party is going to use. There was a question somewhere. Yeah. Oh, you're all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
All right. I asked you to skip problem 122, and I want to go through it, but I think it was a little bit more convoluted than it needed to be. The first thing I want you to understand is the question is what are the proceeds? So we have proceeds. We have three types, right? We have accounts receivable. I think it was sometimes they buy for cash, sometimes they buy for an account receivable, and sometimes they take it with a loan, right? That is secured by a security interest. So we have three kinds of collateral. We have cash, we have accounts receivables, and we have chattel paper. So those are the proceeds. Now we're talking about priority and proceeds. Well, the first thing you need to understand in this problem is that unless a special rule applies, as between two secured parties, 9322 governs, 9322A. And it's the first to file or perfect rule. So accounts. How do you perfect in accounts? What's the method of perfection for accounts?
Control.
Can you control accounts? Is there a section that you would refer to that says you can control accounts?
And there is, I don't know.
Typically, what do people do? Accounts, there really isn't a method of control because what is an account? It's really just a document, an entry, an agreement, an understanding between the parties that a debt is owed. It's an IOU. That's what an account is, essentially. So, does an IOU have to be written down? No. Right? It can come into existence orally. So, because of that, there's no real way, you can't possess them. They're not held by somebody else that can be controlled. So the method of perfection for an account is filing. So what is the answer for the priority and the proceeds in accounts?
First to file.
9322A. What's the rule? What's the basic rule as between two secured parties in any collateral?
First to file.
First to file or perfect?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be first to file or perfect. All right. Now, if it were bank accounts, we'd have a different conversation. Okay? Accounts, yeah. Deposit accounts are the weird ones. Then they would have control. And in fact, the only method of perfection for a bank account is control. And so we have different rules for that one. So now you look at 9322, and you see a section that says B, time for perfection proceeds and supporting obligations, right? For the purposes of subsection A1. Time for, right, that tells us. It's the same priority rule. Now, look down at subsection C.
Professor,
Yeah.
before you continue, I thought you just said the method of perfection of an account was to file.
It is.
But then you said something about method of perfection of an account to control. is
Deposit
control-
account.
Deposit account. So what-
Accounts and deposit accounts are two different kinds of collateral. Deposit account is a bank account.
And regular account is like a debt.
It's an IOU.
Okay.
which is not supported by a piece of commercial paper. So an account is a commercial paper is a note. It's called commercial paper because it's transferable. People buy and sell promissory notes. An IOU is not commercial paper. It's not an instrument for Article 9 purposes. An account is not an instrument. An account is not a deposit account. A deposit account is a bank account. Those are different things. So the definitions are different. Accounts are IOUs that typically come into existence because someone sells something. And it's just the fair obligation, the monetary obligation that exists. Okay, so you take a look at C. Except as otherwise provided, a security interest in collateral which qualifies for priority over conflicting security interest under 9.327, 328, 329, 330, so on and so forth. Okay, so there are other rules about priority in certain specific subcategories of collateral. So we flip to 330. In problem 122, one type of collateral is chattel paper, right? The store sold the audio equipment with a promissory note and a security agreement covering that audio equipment. So that is chattel paper. The most common form of chattel paper that people come into contact with is auto loans, right? There's a security interest in the car and a promissory note to pay back that security interest. That's chattel paper. That's a very common form of chattel paper. But it's not limited to cars. It's any good sold where there's a security interest in that good and a promissory note that an obligation and a security interest tagged together. So if you go to a store and you use store financing to buy, I mean, the hypo that I gave you about what I did, I repoed a guy's waterbed, right? That was sales finance. That was chattel paper. The loan and the security agreement that I had was chattel paper. So 9330 has special rules for chattel paper. And it says, a purchaser of chattel paper has priority over security interest in the chattel paper which is claimed merely as proceeds of inventory. So that's the special rule in this case. 9330A would subordinate the security interest of, what's the bank's name? CMP, right? To CFC. So CFC is a buyer of chattel paper. Its security interest has priority over CMP, Canis Major Bank, because of that rule. Now they also had security interest in accounts. Is accounts one of those subsections? 9327, 28, 29? No. So the general rule applies. The general rule is 9322. First to file or perfect. Inventory, no problem. So just to chart it out, right? So we have the debtor, and then the debtor has two secured parties. The first one is CMP, I think is the initials, and then CFC, right? First to file, right? They have temporal priority. They would win a battle under 9322. This covered inventory. This covers accounts, right? The IOUs that I described, not deposit accounts. Accounts and chattel paper. Okay. This does not cover accounts. This does not cover chattel paper. AAS sells goods. Okay? To buyers. Buyers in the ordinary course, so they take free of the security interest. When this company sells it and gets an account, is that account proceeds of the inventory? Everyone, at this point you should be saying, yes, of course, Professor Smith. Anything received in exchange for the sale of a good is proceeds. An account received in exchange for the sale is proceeds. You really need to understand that. That's critical. This account is proceeds of the sale of that inventory. It's also subject to a security interest by CFC. Who wins on the accounts? 9322 will determine the priority battle for the accounts, right? So just the accounts. But what if they sell for chattel paper? Right? So someone comes in, they're buying the most luxurious, high-end piece of audio equipment you could ever imagine, huge Klipsch speakers, right? 500-watt receiver. No one buys these anymore, right? We all have little speakers in our houses anymore. But when I was in high school, this was my dream, right? A 5-foot Klipsch speaker and a 500-watt receiver with a turntable. What's that Beck song? 2 turntables? Right. I couldn't afford that. So I would sign a promissory note and I would sign a security agreement. Chattel paper. Who wins on the chattel paper? They do. Because of 9-3-30. Okay? The chattel paper is proceeds. Sorry, I should have asked that as another question. The chattel paper is proceeds? Yes. The chattel paper is proceeds. Okay. I wanted to go through this problem because I see it. I was reading through it and I was like, what? And then I see what they were getting. This problem is in there to show you the difference between the traditional rules, 9.322, and the special rules that are governed under 327, 328, 329, 330. And that you get out of subpart 9.322, subpart C. Okay? Now, Aquarius defaults. Who has the first right to pay it off? CMP does on the accounts. CFC does on the chattel paper. That's what the priority rules do. That's between these two. They win on the priority battle and on chattel paper, and they win the priority battle on the accounts. Okay? So after class, at some point, review problem 122, and see if you make sure you understand it, because it's the basic priority battle as between secured parties. That's what they're talking about. So it's as between CFC and CMP who wins, who has priority. Questions about that? And again, the thing that, if you look at 330, it's couched in terms of a purchaser of chattel paper, but a purchaser is the secured party, but the subset of secured parties that are purchasers have priority of secured parties that have interest in chattel paper, which is claimed merely as proceeds. Otherwise, what would happen is their earlier filing date would beat this party. Yeah.
So because the purchaser bought AAC's chattel paper, because CFC had already had a claim to chattel paper, they under 330 they get the proceeds from the chattel paper. That's what 330 is essentially.
330 says tells you who gets the priority. Yes. A purchaser takes, which is claimed merely as proceeds subject to a security interest, okay, has priority, right? It doesn't cut off the security interest of CMP.
But because
in essence, there's nothing left over.
like if CMP had listed proceeds from chattel paper,
They don't need to. They don't need to ever use the word proceeds. They automatically get proceeds, always.
except for
Unless something cuts it off.
another secured party that had claimed chattel paper
No,
as its collateral.
not instead of, in addition to. This bank has a perfected security interest in chattel paper as a purchaser.
Yes.
This party has a perfected security interest in chattel paper as proceeds. They both have a perfected security interest in the same chattel paper.
Okay.
This is the same piece of paper. They have priority under 9330.
Okay.
Yes. But they still, right? If you take a look at the language of 9330, a purchaser of chattel paper has priority. Doesn't eliminate. It's not like a buyer in the ordinary course. Over security interest in the chattel paper, which is claimed merely as proceeds of inventory. Subject to security interest in these two requirements. They have to be a good faith and buy in the ordinary course, And the chattel paper cannot indicate that it was assigned to somebody else. Okay. But you never, ever, ever, ever have to say proceeds in the security agreement. You always get it automatically. Okay. The Helms case. Does proceeds include claims against collateral? Or claims based on the loss of collateral? Does proceeds, in the definition of proceeds, include claims based on the loss of collateral? Yes. 102A64 Part 4, I think, right? Claims is 4, insurance is 5. So, if you're the secured party and your debtor's car is in an accident, and the debtor has a lawsuit against somebody else for the loss of that car, you have a right to the proceeds that come through that lawsuit. That's what that means. If your debtor has insurance on the car and they get a check from the insurance company, that is proceeds of the car as collateral. That's what this means. Okay? Yes?
This is kind of a selfish question because I just need to know for another reason. But what if they don't have?
I'm not a lawyer in Kentucky. I can't give you advice. But you can ask your question hypothetically.
So, but what if the creditor didn't have it on the title that they? Never mind. I'll ask y'all.
No.
So, like that exact scenario, except the person who lent money to buy the car is not listed as a lien holder. So
Well, then they don't have a perfected security interest.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If they're not a perfected secured party, then you have to worry about 9317. Does a bona fide purchaser take free of it? Yeah. But if there's no way to cut them off, right, being perfected or unperfected, does an unperfected secured party still have a security interest? Yes. The other person making a claim to that money, other than the debtor can never make this claim. The other party trying to make a claim to the debtor has to make the argument that because of the unperfection, it eliminates the security interests as them. So the trustee in bankruptcy would say, you don't get those proceeds because you were not perfected in the car. Does that make sense to everybody? If your security interest is not perfected, a buyer takes free of that security interest if they're a bona fide purchaser for value. 9317B. If they take free of that security interest, then the proceeds don't transfer either. That's gone. So the insurance claim is gone. Yeah. All right.
So,
That's what this case is about.
So proceeds also include like the right to sue for property damage?
Yes. It's the claims arising out of the loss of the collateral. Now, I wanted to give a hypo on this. So let's say the secured party is owed, and I think problem 121 sort of gets at this. Let's say there's a loan of $2 million and the collateral is worth $500,000. So stop right there. Are they over or under secured? They're undersecured, right? They have a loan of $2 million and they have a security interest in collateral, let's call it equipment, worth $500,000. So they are now undersecured. Let's say that collateral is destroyed by somebody else who is liable for that destruction. The lawsuit generates an award of $750,000. $500,000 for the collateral, $250,000 for the emotional distress from the loss of the collateral. I don't know. Right. How much of that $750,000 is proceeds? 500. Only the collateral, only the claim that relates to the loss of the collateral. So just because the lawsuit generates huge winnings does not give the secured party extra security. They only are entitled to the value of the collateral. Okay? That's in the definition of proceeds. They do not, it does not expand. The blob does not go to reach other kinds of claims. It's only as to the collateral. And again, let's say the collateral is worth $3 million and they get an award of $3 million. Do they get all $3 million? No, they're only owed $2 million. They get what they're owed. So there are limits built into this. Owed in the sense of the obligation that supports the security interest. Okay, problem 121, we did we're down to 122, right? We just did 122, so 123. And I need to go to the page that has 123 on it. It is right. Yeah, good, okay. We have 3 more problems, so let's do this one together. Okay, so we have the company, Sadrec Heating and Air Conditioning, borrowing $15,000, and one of their clients wants to buy that heating system. Was that heating system inventory? Well, where was it when they sold it? It was in their offices. So is it their inventory?
That's almost like the used car salesman who used the
Yeah.
car. Yeah.
It could be inventory. If it's inventory, yeah, no, okay. So we have SHAC, they borrow from MMF in order to purchase a new a furnace for their home office. When a client needs it, they sell it. So they sell, so this is the, we're just gonna say collateral for now, right? Collateral. And they sell that to the client, and they get back $17,000 check. Okay? It's probably inventory because they're in the business of selling it, but maybe it's not inventory because they sold it because they had it in their office. That's not what this question is about, okay? We're just going to call it collateral for right now. Where does the money go? This is your question. Where does the money go? What do they do with the $17,000? They deposit it where? Whose bank? No, which bank? Where's the bank account?
Abednego?
Abednego State Bank.
Abednego.
ASB. So there's a bank account with ASB. So it's their bank account at this place. How much is in it before they deposit the money?
$81.
$81. Okay. They deposit $17,000, right? What's the balance now?
$17,800.
Okay. So that's the balance in the account. What's the next thing that happens? Don't they write a check?
No, they add $5,000 more to it.
They add $5,000. Okay. What's the balance now? Everyone in here is like, okay, you gotta add and subtract, all right? Maybe you don't have to do calculus or trigonometry, but you gotta be able to add and subtract. And I would argue you have to be able to do a present value calculation too. Oh, that's what? Present value? Isn't everything worth what it's worth today? No. Okay, not for another class. All right, so the balance as of this point is $22.81. So question A, are the proceeds from the furnace sale still in the bank accounts?
He took another $5,000.
Yeah, they made a withdrawal.
After that.
That's what I was asking about, yes. There was a withdrawal, right?
We had to deal with that.
Thank you.
41 now.
What's the balance now?
$17,041.
Okay. Are all of the proceeds still in the bank accounts?
Yes,
Why?
that's what I don't know.
Exactly, great question, right? This is the lowest intermediate balance rule. The lowest intermediate balance rule says we ask the question 2 times. 1, when the proceeds go into the account, and 2, at the time we're doing the analysis. And now we ask a question. What was the lowest balance in that account in between those 2 periods of time? That's the lowest amount, isn't it? Is that less or more than the proceeds?
$41.
So, in the hypo I have in the book, in the lecture, I talk about a cup holding liquid. The green is the proceeds. The proceeds go to the bottom of the cup. When you pour out of the cup, what comes out first? Does the red liquid or the green liquid come out first? Red does, right? So, you got the cup. I'm a terrible drawer, right? So, the red spills out, but the green stays in. This comes out first. All right, so first, can we trace into the bank account? Yes, it's proceeds. Second, how much of that bank account is proceeds? When it's $17,041, how much of that is proceeds?
15,000. Oh, God.
How much of proceeds went in? How much is the green liquid? 17, right? That's what went in. That's the proceeds. How much was added? 5,041. Did we ever pour out more than did the balance ever dip below the 17,000? So the answer to question A is yes, the full amount of the proceeds are still in the bank account.
Okay, so if at any point it would have dipped below 17,
Yes.
then you get whatever that was.
So let's say we have one more transaction. They take out $10,000. That leaves two more transactions, 7,041, and then they add in, let's say 2,000 to make the numbers different. That balance now is 9,041. If I'm asking the question today, what was the lowest balance over the course of these 2 time frames? 7,000. Is 7,000 less than the total amount of the proceeds?
Yes.
So when they add in the $2,000, how much of this is proceeds? 7,041. Does that help?
Yeah, kind of, but I guess my real question was like, what's the policy behind it? That's what I didn't understand.
There is no set Article 9 policy. You look to other law, and it's an equitable principle. And in many jurisdictions, they use the lowest intermediate balance test as the way to trace. Because remember in my hypo earlier, if I traded equipment for a tractor, is it easy to identify the tractor?
Yes.
It's that tractor. How do you identify a dollar in a bank account?
It's hard.
Can't. Unless you use principles of adding and subtracting.
Okay.
And so the policy is we need to make money identifiable. We make money identifiable through 2 systems. 1, by tracking the values, and 2, for the lowest intermediate balance rule, we see what the lowest balance was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, if my bank account's at like 941, and I like went in there and wrote a check to some rent for whatever reason for $9,000, like that didn't have anything to do with this.
No, it's not about overdrafts. No.
Well, I mean, like, and then like the lowest balance would be like $41.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So then,
So if the lowest balance is 0, then there's no proceeds anymore in the bank account.
I mean, that just
the
doesn't
lowest
seem
balance
fair
is-
to me, but I guess I don't know.
Well, it's risk assigning, right?
Okay.
Because there are ways for the bank to protect themselves. If they don't do anything else and they allow this to happen, it's their fault.
Okay.
That's why. Okay? This is their fault. They didn't take extra steps. And in the problem, I think it's maybe the last problem, they ask about what the extra steps are. Okay. B, if they default on the loan and also an unsecured promissory note held by Abnego State Bank, ASB, right? Now remember, this is from the problem. This was me adding facts, okay? Who gets the money? Can the bank, ASB, exercise its common law right of set-off and pay itself out of the checking account? Or is it junior to MMFA? What does 340 say? What does 340 say?
The bank or group should deposit account if they obtain, may exercise any right of recoupment or set off.
Got it. Done. Let's stop right there. The depository bank, the bank where the money is on deposit, always has the right to use its common law right of set-off against anybody else under Article 9. Doesn't matter how it got in there. They have a right to a set-off under the common law. So their unsecured loan, they can wipe the bank account to pay off their unsecured loan. And they have no problem against MMFA. So 340 says the right of set-off beats the right of priority. Yes?
I went in my bank, withdrew everything, and then immediately deposited it back in so that there was a transaction with zero balance. Would that make my lowest intermediate balance zero?
So again, these are equitable principles. This is not an Article 9 principle. Would a court using its equity power ignore your transaction? I am guaranteed.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's an equitable principle outside of Article 9. Article 9 does not have a money tracing rule. Yeah.
Just 9, 340, B and C, they talk about when the set-off is ineffective. So
Yeah.
the secured party has the control over the account.
Yes. So that was the next question. How does a secured party avoid this?
Control of the account.
Yes. And what is the best kind of control of the account that will beat the bank? You can never possess a deposit account. You have to have control, but there's three kinds of control. There's be the bank, so that's ASB, have a contract with the bank, or be the depositor.
Like a cosigner or something.
Well, actually, just put your name on the account. That's the best thing. Yes. That's how you protect yourself against bad actors or people you don't know. You set up a bank account that you, the secured party, is the named account for. And that beats out the depository bank. And think of it from a contract law perspective. Who has the contract with the bank in that scenario? The secured party, MMFA, right? I didn't fully write out their name, right? If this creditor becomes the account holder, can this bank use their account to pay off somebody else's debt? Of course not. You would be pissed if they did that. Bob owns some money. We're just taking a little bit of cash out of your account. What? No. And that's how they win. That's how they avoid this. If you are a secured party and you're worried about this, you set up special bank accounts where the money gets deposited. And you become the depository bank. So that's how you avoid this problem. That was B. Is there another part to this, or is that it? C. Oh yeah, we just answered that one. Okay, and then D, what's the problem in part D? If the depository bank has a security interest in proceeds deposited in the debtor's account, but honors a check that depletes the account, may it still recover the money as traceable and identifiable proceeds? What's the answer to that question? We look at 332. Which you all read because you came prepared for today's class. He said, extremely pleased with everyone in this class who worked so hard to be ready for class. Yeah, see? I'm proud of all of you. 332 says, the transferee of money out of a deposit account takes free of any security interest so long as it's in good faith. And that's to preserve the banking system. We cannot have a banking system where secured parties are running around suing transferees of money, right? Your utility bill comes in. You write a check to LG&E. LG&E is not going to be happy if all of a sudden your secured party calls up and goes, yeah, that money, it's ours. No. As long as it's done in good faith. So that's kind of your scenario. If you're trying to game the system, it doesn't work. But if you're acting in good faith, it's fine. Transferees of money out of a deposit account. And transferees of cash, same thing, right? You got proceeds in your pocket. You take the proceeds and you buy a newspaper. That money goes free of a security interest. Cash is the same way. Okay? All right. 124. One 124 is a little complicated. It involves sort of two concepts that I want to talk about. New debtors and double debtors. Okay? I think earlier in the semester you probably did some Cali exercises that had proceeds in them. Do you recall that? There were assignments like 29 was one of them I assigned earlier that probably talked about this a little bit. So proceeds isn't its own Cali assignment. They talk about it as the material goes along. The new debtor, which is primarily what this problem is the person that becomes, well, let's look it up. Look up the definition of new debtor. 9102A 56, I think? 53?
56.
56, okay. Who is a new debtor? It's somebody who becomes bound by a security agreement. How do you become bound by a security agreement? It refers you to the section in 9203. It says, 9203D tells you when somebody is a new debtor. And a new debtor is a person who becomes subject to an existing security interest held by a different debtor. So in the problem, we have two stores that have their own loans, and then they merge. Okay, that new merged entity becomes a new debtor. Is it subject to the existing security interests of the previous companies? Yes, that's what the merger rules say. When you merge a company in, you assume the assets and liabilities of the old company. Okay. That's what the new debtor is. So you've got a new party that is subject to somebody else's security agreement. In that circumstance, does the filed financing statement cover the collateral of the new debtor? Yes, 9508, right? But the name's wrong sometimes. It is in this problem. What do you do if the name's wrong, right? You have a new debtor with a different name. Is the financing statement adequate is it, what's the, I'm getting the wrong terminology here, I'm blanking on it. What's it called? Is it seriously misleading? Is the name seriously misleading? They went from being big store and, well, I forget what TS stood for. And then they became TDS, right? Is the name seriously misleading? Yes, you would not find it in a search of the Secretary of State's office. So what do you have to do? 508B. You got to refile. And if you don't refile, newly acquired collateral after 4 months is not covered by the new debtor. Collateral they acquire after the acquisition, after the 4-month period, is not covered, is not perfected, not subject to that security.
They do that. What if they did and
You said it, you.
So is it first of all, okay?
I'm 14, what do you want? I mean, yes, then they're fine, right?
But then it's like if between two are the first of all, okay?
Yes, then we have 9322, first to file or perfect. Otherwise, the other rules kick in, right? So the new debtor, I know that's what am I, 12 years old? It's ridiculous. I won't even admit to watching South Park because that's a terrible show and no one should ever watch it. Terrible, terrible.
No.
9326. Subject to subsection B, a security interest that is created by a new debtor in collateral in which the new debtor has or acquires rights and is perfected solely by a filed financing statement that would be ineffective to perfect the security interest, but for 9316 I1, which is the you move to a different state rule, where 9508 is subordinate to the security interest in the same collateral which is perfected other than by such a filed financing. So if the only reason that there's a perfection is 9508, that security interest is subordinated to the new debtor's creditor. Okay? There's another kind of problem called the double debtor problem. And a good example of that is you purchase something not free of a security interest. So you don't have buyer in the ordinary course, you don't have unperfected, right? So you buy something and you have your own security interest. So we have, I'm talking through this problem because I think they merge two ideas in the same problem. You have debtor 1 sells to debtor 2, right? They sell some collateral. They have their own secured parties. Now, the collateral, which is here, is subject to two security interests, right? It's subject to the security interest of the original creditor because it's not a buyer in the ordinary course or whatever. And it's also covered, there's two debtors, right? Two secured parties. The transferor, let me get my notes on this. The transferor's, here we go. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So here we're going to look at 507. So 507A says, a filed financing statement remains effective with respect to collateral that is sold, exchanged, leased, licensed, or otherwise disposed of, in which the security interest in or agricultural lien, even if the secured party knows of or consents to the disposition, right? Okay, if the holder of the security interest created by the transferor, so the seller, debtor 1, has a priority over a security interest created by the transferee under new section 9322, so now we go to 322 to see, right? So the transferee doesn't take free of the security interest. That file financing statement is still good. The original secured party is still perfected. It's not an unperfected situation. They're still perfected. 9322. Conflicting security interests and agricultural liens rank in according to priority in the time of filing or perfection. Okay? But you take a look at 324, look at 9325, and you'll see that the transferee's secured party beats out the transferor's secured party. Except as otherwise provided in subsection B, a security interest created by a debtor is subordinate to a security interest in the same collateral created by another person if the debtor acquired the collateral subject to the security interest created by the other person. Security interest created by the other person was perfected, and there is no period thereafter when the security interest is unperfected. So 507 tells us that the original security financing statement is still good, right? And normally we would look at 9322, but 325 says that secured party number 2 gets subordinated under 325. All right, so we're out of time. The last problem is a good review of all this. So why don't we start next class reviewing 9325 and move on to the new material. So now I want to close up. I want to provide an opportunity now to meet and talk about reviewing the material. Okay, so we have 3 Fridays until the end of the semester. I'm not requiring anybody come to these, but I'm gonna make myself available over the next 3 Fridays here if you have questions about the material. And I just realized right this second, I did not post that old exam. I will post that old exam so you have that and you can read it. And that would be a great time to come and talk to me if you get a chance to review the old exam. Questions that are, okay? Yes, I know we didn't get a chance. I was hoping to, but I want to do that in class. I'll do it at the beginning of class. Yeah. No,
December
I do not.
3rd,
But I know that we have one, and it has a time.
I think
Yeah.
it's December
And I-
3rd at 9 a.m., but I'm not
There you go,
positive.
December 3rd at 9 a.m. I'm not vouching for that, but that could
Maybe,
be right.
yeah, I'm not-
Okay. I